All right, let's get right into it. Today we're going to talk about something you've definitely experienced even if you didn't have a name for it. It's called the Google effect. And the big question we're asking is, well, is the internet actually changing how our memory works?
You know that feeling, right? You're trying to remember who sang that one song or the capital of some state, and you know it's in there somewhere. But then this little voice in your head goes, who cares? I can just look it up. That feeling, that's not just you. It might be a whole new way our brains are getting wired.
And yeah, it's got a name, the Google effect, or a slightly more dramatic name, digital amnesia. Basically, it's this tendency we have to just let go of information because we know it's safely stored online. We're essentially outsourcing the job of remembering to Google, trusting that it'll always have our back.
And look, this isn't just some idea people throw around on the internet. This thing was actually studied. It was first formally described way back in 2011 in a paper by a team of researchers, Betsy Sparrow, Jenny Liu, and Daniel Wagner. They were really the first ones to put this modern-day habit under a scientific microscope. So how in the world do you test something like this? I mean, how do you prove that we're using the internet as a kind of external brain? Well, the way they designed their original experiment was actually pretty clever.
So let's rewind to July 2011. This team sets out with this really fascinating goal. They wanted to see if, on a subconscious level, we're starting to treat the internet like it's literally an external hard drive plugged right into our brains.
Their experiment had this really elegant four-part design. First, they got people thinking about tech. Then, they split them up and basically tested if people even bothered trying to remember facts if they thought a computer was going to save it for them. But the last part, that's the real kicker. They tested whether people remembered the information itself or just where the information was saved.
So they ran all these tests on a bunch of people, and what they found was, well, pretty wild. The results suggested that we're not just accidentally letting facts slip our minds. It's almost like we're making an unconscious decision to forget them.
And it all boiled down to these three key things. First, when we're stumped, our brains immediately think of computers. Second, we just don't commit information to memory if we think it's going to be available later. And third, and this is the big one, we are well better at remembering where to find information than we are at remembering the information itself.
This really says it all. It's like our brain makes a choice. It decides, okay, that piece of trivia, that's saved in the Google folder, so I don't need to keep a copy here in my own head. We remember the path to the file, but not what's actually in it.
And if you're thinking, okay, that's kind of interesting, but it's just a lab study, well, take a look at this number, 91%.
That comes from a big survey on digital amnesia done in 2015. It found that a whopping 91% of us admit to using the internet as an external brain. And we're not just talking about looking up obscure movie trivia. We're talking about offloading things we really should know, like phone numbers for our own kids or partners.
All this weird behavior made those original researchers think about something even bigger. What if this isn't a failure of our memory at all? What if what we're seeing is the birth of a totally new kind of memory? What if the internet is actually becoming part of our minds?
To explain it, they reached for this older idea from psychology called transactive memory. Think about it in your own family or group of friends. There's always one person who remembers all the birthdays, right? And another person who's the expert on movie quotes. You don't all have to remember everything because you've distributed the job of remembering across the group. It's a shared memory system.
So here's the theory. Sparrow and her team suggested that we're now treating our computers and the internet as another person in that memory network. We're not just asking who knows the answer to this anymore. We're asking what knows the answer to this. And more often than not, the answer is our phone.
And this really lays it out perfectly. On the left, you have traditional memory. It's all about internalizing facts, remembering the what. But on the right, this new transactive model powered by the internet is all about knowing how to find the answer. The most important skill shifts from knowing the fact to knowing where to find it. The source of knowledge isn't just your brain anymore. It's your entire network.
Now, this all sounds like a super neat theory that perfectly explains our modern world, right? But here's the thing about science. Ideas are meant to be challenged. And the story of the Google effect, well, it's got a pretty major twist.
So other researchers started to poke holes in the idea. They said, hold on, can you really call this transactive memory? A transaction needs two active partners, right? But your computer isn't thinking. It's not participating. They argued that our devices are just incredibly powerful tools for looking stuff up, not actual partners in a cognitive system.
So the debate went on for a few years, and then came this huge moment.
Let's add one more date to our timeline. In 2018, 7 years after that first study, a massive replication project was published in Nature, one of the biggest science journals in the world. This project was a huge deal. They reran dozens of famous experiments to see if they held up. And here's the bombshell. When they reran the Google effect experiment, they couldn't get the same results. In their super carefully controlled tests, the effect that seemed so obvious back in 2011, it just wasn't there.
Now hold on. This doesn't necessarily mean the Google effect is a total myth or that the original scientists were wrong. What it really shows is something beautiful about how science is supposed to work. An interesting idea gets put out there, it gets tested, it gets debated, and then it gets retested by other people. This is how we get closer to the truth, not in a straight line, but through this constant cycle of questioning and correcting.
Which brings us right back to the core question. Because even if the specific lab results are up for debate, we all feel this happening, don't we? So the question is still there for all of us. When you pull out your phone to look something up, are you just using a handy tool to help your memory? Or are you slowly training your brain to rely on a replacement? What do you think?